In this video, we're going to attempt to install Windows NT 4.0 from 1996 on this Compaq Proliant DL-380 Gen 1. This nice looking enterprise machine is sporting dual Pentium 3 processors, and we have a little bit of history on the bench here. HP bought Compaq in 2002, and to this day, they still continue the Proliant line of enterprise servers, and this is one such model from the first generation in the year 2000. At the beginning of this video, you'll see I'm fresh and starry-eyed, and I think I'm going to use this thing as an authentication server for some Windows 95 and Windows 98 machines, of course, all over a token ring network. But I want to level with you. The attempt to install Windows NT was way more involved than I had anticipated. But it's not all bad news. We'll take a good look at this very interesting machine, play around with a massive Compaq Smart Array SCSI controller that came with it, and learn all about Compaq SmartStart. SmartStart was the software used to configure and administer these early Proliants. You can sort of think of it like a BIOS, but it's much, much more. And as you can see, it's obviously some sort of licensed copy of Windows running the SmartStart software. In fact, back in the day, if you lost your SmartStart disk, Compaq would charge you for another one, because there's a licensed copy of Windows on here, and Microsoft was getting their cut on each disk as well. So sit back, relax, watch me struggle, enjoy the journey. Let's get into it. Today, we're going to become amateur Windows systems administrators from the late 90s by installing Windows NT 4.0 on this Compaq Proliant DL-380 dual Pentium 3 machine from the year 2000. As we install Windows NT on this thing, we're going to get it set up as something called a primary domain controller. This isn't a domain in the sense that you're probably thinking of it, resolving collabretro.com with DNS to an IP address that the server's actually at, but rather a Windows domain. Domains in the Windows enterprise networking world are groups of computers and users and access controls, giving the users on the network access to a computer or to a share on another computer or to a printer or whatever. Prior to Windows NT introducing this idea of a domain to manage networks of computers and users and permissions, there were a bunch of options for something called a network operating system. So Microsoft LAN Manager is one example. NetWare was the predominant network operating system force in the 90s. But with Windows NT, Microsoft was trying to make their server operating system a full-fledged network operating system to compete in the market. Your other option might have been to use something like Microsoft Windows for Workgroups. Here's Windows 3.1, Windows for Workgroups. A workgroup is also a set of computers on a network, but it's a little different. It's another Windows thing. So if you've ever been on Windows 98 or Windows 95 and you have the same workgroup name, the default is workgroup, and then you're sharing a folder and other computers can access that folder, but it's not centralized. That's workgroup networking computing basically. But having permissions and access spread out on all the different individual computers doesn't scale. So with the domain controller or those network operating systems, to be fair, you get a centralized authoritative place for login, password, user control, share access, all of that. While the earlier versions of Windows NT brought around the domain controller concept, I'm going with 4.0 on this Compaq because it's slightly more era appropriate. This came out in 2000. Windows NT 4.0 came out in 1996. Windows NT 4.0's claim to fame is typically taking on the Windows 95 shell, meaning the graphical user interface, look and feel of it was a lot like Windows 95, so that's always interesting to behold. And I think 4.0 kind of is that sweet spot from late 90s to early 2000s for me personally that I'm interested in. I also just don't have any era-appropriate server hardware to put something like 3.51 on. Windows NT 4.0 came in various flavors, and the eagle-eyed here will notice that this resource kit book I keep flaunting is this workstation version. We will definitely be installing the server version on this Compaq because the workstation version is meant for individual computers, me or you sitting down working on our spreadsheets or whatever and can't be a domain controller. At this point, you're probably asking, why am I going to do this? Well, first of all, I'd like to become more familiar with Windows NT, especially Windows NT 4.0. I think I've spent a grand total of 10 minutes using that operating system in a VM, as well as how small to even large enterprises may have been networking their computers in the mid-90s, we'll say to the early 2000s. But mostly, it's in service of this impressive gear you see on top of the Compaq now. In the past few weeks, I have been exploring token ring networking, The Token Ring network was a competitor to Ethernet, and it uses these very impressive cables you see on the front of these MAUs here. These are media access units for linking all the computers together. And on part of that journey, I have revived 2 Windows 95 machines and a Windows 98 laptop. Getting Windows NT set up on this Compaq and getting a domain controller configured will actually let me remotely on this thing configure share access and usernames and passwords that I will be able to use on the Windows 95 and Windows 98 machines, just like an enterprise might have back in the day. And in my case, my odd case here, I'm doing it all over Token Ring networking. But let's get on with it. Look at this thing. So I'll show you around a little bit. And also I'm pretty sure the floppy drive doesn't work. So we're gonna have to do something about that. We are going to need that for Windows NT install, I'm pretty sure. I had done a video covering this in a little more depth, and I installed Windows 2000 on it at that time. But since then, it's made some cameos, and I'm pretty sure I stole one of the hard drives in that raid. So we're gonna rebuild all that. Let's pull these bottom ones out. Nothing in there. Empty. Empty, yeah, I definitely stole a hard drive from this thing's raid. Maybe we'll power it up, see what it does. And this one does have a drive. These take Ultra 3 SCSI drives. Looks like we've got 10,000 RPM Seagate Cheetah. Unclear how big that actually is. It's always glaring at me when I edit the video later. If you're familiar with HP gear, you might recognize these sleds, except these are Compaq branded. HP bought Compaq in the early 2000s and continued this Proliant line. This is a Gen 1, the very first one. They had several variants. This happens to be a DL-380. And when hard drives were insanely expensive, they used to like to brag about how big they were right on the tray. So we got this, used to be a 36.4 gigabyte 15K, and one of my other trays, probably from a different machine, a 72.8 gigabyte 10K Ultra 3 SCSI. On the front, it's got the drive bays, obviously, CD-ROM that came stock with the unit, I believe, a little floppy drive, and this is like a full metal kind of front bezel thing that is actually very hard to take off. We won't be doing that, I hope, anyway, in case we need to for that floppy drive. And of course, it's got that Compaq styling. In a previous video, I had called this Collab Retro Dev 1, but we'll be giving that a different name today. Around back, some other really nice features. Redundant power supplies, those both work. Got the PS2 keyboard and mouse, a couple serial ports, and then an integrated NIC, which is always welcome, and then VGA. So this thing has video out, and we're going to need it because you use something called SmartStart to actually configure this thing. It's like a BIOS that lives on a CD-ROM for this thing. That'll be fun. I'll show you all about that. And right there you can see an old label from the original owner, Files. I got this thing in a Craigslist slot, I don't know, almost 3 years ago, and it's my understanding it originally lived its life in the great state of Wyoming, and now it lives down here in Colorado. And it's going to be a Windows NT domain controller for a Token Ring network. Follow your dreams. On the front, it's got these captive screws, and you almost always forget to undo one of them when you're trying to take it off. And they're not so captive anymore. I need to use a screwdriver because they're pretty tight. Something about this case design results in it bending or shifting during shipping or over time. I actually have 2 of these, and they both have the same problem. It's pretty hard to align the case just right. And so these screws are doing quite a bit of work, kind of bending everything back the way it should be when you tighten it. And as you'll see here, it's got this sort of odd L-shaped case, like that there. Inside the case, beautifully laid out, you can put some really big cards in here. I think these are PCI X slots. So those kind of came out in the enterprise game between PCI and PCI Express. So they're not PCIe, they are PCI X. I've got some PCI Token Ring cards. My 20 seconds of research tells me that these are backwards compatible with certain PCI cards, so hopefully I've got the right ones. It's a speed issue, perhaps a skill issue later. And I can't really fault these machines for much else than this horrendous foam they put on the bottom of this air baffle. I've just sort of left mine in. That used to come up with it. Oh my god. I think I'm going to leave that out from now on. Got some RAM hiding down in there and 2 Pentium 3s. How awesome is that? Better angle of those slot 1 dual Pentium 3s in this bad boy. Love it. Get this hard drive back in here and we'll just see what it does. I can't remember what sort of RAID I set up. I suppose if I set up like a redundant RAID, though I suspect, knowing me, it was a RAID 0, it might just work and boot into Windows 2000, and then we'll find some other drives and wipe that. We'll explore Windows 2000 in the future, because while the domain controller came out with NT, I hope I'm right about that, or I'm going to get lit up in the comments. Active Directory was sort of the next iteration with more fine-grained controls, and I think it sort of lives on to this day in one way or the other. And that came out with Windows 2000, so we will explore that someday with this machine or another one perhaps. Got it hooked up. It's not horrendous to be around when it's running. It's quieter than you would expect, but I wouldn't say it's pleasant, so I might have to figure out a way to remotely manage this thing in a different room as we progress through the video. In fact, I've got it plugged into power, but it's not turned on, and you can see there's this activity indicator there. That's because you can install a remote management card in these things. The power supplies will power that, and it let you, remotely boot it up and stuff. I actually have said card, and I played around it very briefly with it in an old video, and I'll have to cover that in more depth someday. So let's power it up and see if Windows 2000 kicks on. It doesn't really matter, we're going to reformat it anyway. If you have one of these, it takes a few moments for the video to come on, maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and it's pretty nerve-wracking while you're waiting thinking your machine is broken. There it is, that awesome Compaq Proliant splash screen there. Wonder what we're going to get. It's got 512 megs of RAM. It sees both processors. It's complaining that one of the power supplies is not plugged in. It thinks it has 0 logical drives. So yeah, I definitely pulled that bad boy out of a RAID 0. The one drive that's in there, it's complaining. And when I'm talking about RAID 0, what I mean is I had 2 drives in here, and with a RAID controller, the onboard RAID controller, I was able to combine them into one logical drive that I installed Windows 2000 on. I have since wiped that drive and used it for something else. So let's power it down and find some hard drives for this thing. Found an identical Seagate Cheetah in my stash here. Same exact model as the one that's already in there. So I'll get that in one of these trays. I, of course, could have just formatted this one as one drive, but I'll show you setting up 2 in a RAID. That'll be kind of cool. And I'm not going to blow it out with all 4 drives because I have an era-appropriate compact disk shelf that I'd like to blow out with hard drives. I just need to find enough of the same equivalent SCSI drives to load this thing up. I don't actually know if this second drive works. It seems to have taken a fall in its previous life. There's an indication of some damage there, and the edge connector's kind of banged up, but we'll give it a shot. The next hurdle is, do I have the right screws? One second. I can't find any. I was going to steal a screw from my existing sled. It's also just floating in there, but it's got these sort of wings that as you push it into the machine, of course, they're held tight, and the drive actually can't move, so we're just going to slide these in there, and I'm going to have to hunt down a bunch of these screws because we're going to load up that disk array I was showing you and build out a pretty sophisticated Windows-based network someday. Wouldn't that be funny if it couldn't find this drive because it's loose in the sled or something? We'll see. Got the original one here, got my second one here. I don't know if that drive works. And then I suppose you would have started at the bottom. Usually 0, 1, 2, 3 are the labels, but I don't think the RAID controller software is going to care. It's firing back up now. The array controller is initializing. It's spinning disks. Interesting. Now, it actually thinks it found a logical drive. Slightly different indicator behavior. This one has a green disk indicator, and then the new one has the complaint. The RAID controller might just always expect 2 drives, because that's how I set it up. Let's see. I don't recall if you can partition from here. I'm going to hit F10 for System Partition Utilities. I'm pretty sure I have to use that. Yeah, utilities are not available on the system. I have to go find one of those SmartStart CDs. We will give SmartStart version 5.50 a shot, and I'll reboot the machine. We're back here. I think I want to do F1 to continue, and I'm hoping it's going to boot from that disk. And it is. Get ready, folks. SmartStart for servers. And I'm fairly certain this is just some sort of weird licensed version of Windows, maybe Windows 95 or something. And we'll get into the array configuration utility. Odd as this all is, it's pretty slick. So let's go into the array configuration utility. It has found the embedded array controller, and I had set up apparently a 140 gig RAID 0. It only sees 1 physical drive. That might be a problem. I want to just delete this. Modify, I guess. Yeah, I think we got a problem. Down in the corner there, it says flashing drive tray LEDs to help locate your drives. And again, It only sees one physical drive, and it is only blinking this one. So either this drive is bad or it's not seated properly. I'm going to try to reseat it first. If that doesn't work, I'll find another drive. I'll bring you back, tell you what I find out. I reseated this drive, meaning I literally unclicked the tray, pulled it out a little bit, and then carefully pushed it back in, rebooted the computer, and now they're both blinking. And I'd like to say that's because I don't have screws in these trays, which might be contributing, but I've had this issue with this backplane back here. I think it's just getting a little worn out over the years. Got back into the array configuration and jumped through a ton of hoops to delete the existing array, and it notices that there is no array, and I'm in this controller wizard, so let's just run through it, see what it's like. We are going to do this one. I'm going to do a drive mirror this time, just for fun, so I can lose one of these drives, which seems likely given their age. So it seems to know there is one logical RAID, and there, you can see two 146 gig drives. So let's just continue, click save, and that's that. We can exit out of all this. Machine is powered down now. Next order of business is to get a known good boot disk. This happens to just be a Windows 95 boot disk, but that's fine for testing. I'm almost positive this floppy drive doesn't work, or at least it didn't last time I tried it. So let's find out. I don't think I've ever seen any proper indication of success. Oh, I take that back. It's trying. Windows 95 boot disk. Okay, let's find some Windows NT install media. Got Windows NT Server 4.0 ready to go, and I am painfully aware that it is only going to be able to take advantage of a fraction of my 140 or so gigs here, but that's okay for our use case. Let's try the Windows 95 boot disk just for fun, just for science. I think we have to make a 2 gig partition on our 146 gig logical drive here. Get ourselves ready to go. I guess we'll try to load up with the NEC IDE CD-ROM driver. Found a drive. That's looking promising. And we need to get into fdisk to make a 2 gig partition, I think. Helps if you spell it right. Let's create the partition. Primary. Ooh, that's going to take a while. Something like 300 seconds, if I'm counting correctly. That passed. Let's make it active. Got some nice healthy drives, at any rate. Got that done and rebooted. I don't know if I need to format it. We will find out. Here's our NT install media. I've never installed Windows NT, but word on the street is, in the i386 folder, there's a WinNT executable. We give it /B, and apparently we want to do this. Let's find out. Maybe just D. Yeah, okay, just the D drive. Alright, yeah, maybe I need to format that thing. It's saying it can't find a drive with enough space. Back to A. Format C, hopefully. So far, so good. Yeah, okay. We have our maximum of 8 gigs we're going to be able to use, but that's okay. This also might take an entire century. Wish I had some smaller drives. That was moving at less than 1% per minute. So I started looking through my drive pile, and I did find a 9 gig Compaq branded drive in the sled with the screws. I'm going to do all that over again rather than waiting here probably about 2 hours. And instead of wasting those larger drives on this domain controller operation, we are going to dedicate this properly sized 9 gig drive. I'm going to go do all that over again, and I'll bring you back when I'm installing Windows NT. If you're quick enough at boot, you can get into this ROM configuration for the array. And I'm going to delete the existing logical drive. Hopefully I don't have to do that smart controller stuff. Let me show you. Never mind. Yeah, I do. We're back to this point, and it only took me 25 minutes to get the new drive in, formatted, and everything. So I guess we saved time, but when I try to continue the setup, it says, unable to install the Windows NT bootloader. You can do a little research. Let's try all of that again with a newer Windows 98 SE boot disk for the fdisk and formatting. Oh man, I finally got past my hard disk issues. It's the next evening, and we are copying the setup files to the hard disk. We're not out of the woods yet, but this is a really good sign. Hi, let me fill you in on how I've gotten this far, where I can actually start the Windows NT install after several hours of troubleshooting Remember when I said I was going to make a 2 GB partition? I think we have to make a 2 gig partition. Well, I never actually did that. When you start up fdisk and it asks you if you want to support large disk formats, the correct answer in this case is no. Otherwise, by default, it's going to make a partition larger than 2 GB, which NT doesn't support. You can actually customize the partition size even if you click yes, but it's not exactly clear how to do that, and to be fair, fdisk wasn't created with the best user experience in mind. Better yet, throughout this adventure, I was able to get this disk into the situation several times where I couldn't even delete the partitions and start over. Fdisk would complain about a logical DOS partition existing that I needed to delete first, so you'd go and look for logical DOS partitions, and it would say there weren't any. I found several Comp, OS, MS-DOS, MISC, Usenet posts from 1999 where a bunch of people were hitting this exact same situation, and they all recommended a DOS utility called delpart. So I went and found delpart.exe on this sketchy website. Somehow Windows 11 did not flag it as a virus. Threw that on a floppy disk, and sure enough, this delpart utility would happily obliterate all these partitions that my boot disk could not see with their normal fdisk utility, and I was back on track. After you create a partition 2 gigs or less, which is a requirement for the install media I'm using anyway for NT 4.0 here, it's as simple as a format C. Fun fact, my Windows 98 SE boot disk does not include the format utility for some reason. So anytime I wanted to format, I had to throw back in the Windows 95 boot disk, which did have the format command for some reason. I should do a side note about partitions and formatting. This is going to be grossly oversimplified, but enough to kind of get us through it, I think. You can partition a drive into different pieces. And typically, in this era anyway, you would have what's called a default primary DOS partition that's active, and that's where the OS would like kind of install its media. Once you have one or more partitions on a drive, you do something called formatting, and this is laying down a file system on the partitions. You can think of a file system as how things are dealt with on the disk, and there are many different strategies. So if you had like a filing cabinet with 4 drawers, you might start at the bottom or start at the top. In each drawer, you might have alphabetical ascending or descending physical files. And now that I'm actually saying this out loud, I suppose that is where the file system term might have come from. But anyway, you get this disk into a good state, and then you try to install Windows NT, and it complains about locks. I had been bitching to the guys over at the serial port about how much trouble I was having installing Windows NT on this thing, and they linked me to an old video of theirs where they got it installed on another machine. I think it was the workstation version. And they encountered this exact same lock situation, so that saved me about an hour of troubleshooting. Now, let's continue trying to get Windows NT installed on this thing. All of the install media has been copied to the hard drive. Let's see if we can boot from it and continue the setup. This actually wouldn't be so bad, except it takes a solid almost minute to get to this point. So troubleshooting is just insanely expensive. So let's F1 to continue. I hope it's going to boot from the hard drive. Yeah, I think that's the CD-ROM. So let's see what it does. I don't know if I like this. Yeah, I think I should have pulled the disk out. So I'm going to do all that over again. This is a classic move back in the day. Forget to do that. All right, round 28. Are you having fun yet? F1. Hopefully there's something on this disk. Okay, the CD-ROM is not in, as you just saw. This, yeah, way faster. These are the files that were on the hard disk that the original setup copied. It can only see one of my processors, which is like totally whack. Deal with that later. No. No. Inaccessible boot device. Oh, jeez. Should I have left the CD-ROM in? I don't know. I really don't think this is what's going on, but I'll put the CD-ROM back in, and we're just going to run it again. Yeah. No, this isn't going to work. I think we need the drivers for the Compaq Smart Array, and we've only got Compaq Drive Array and Compaq Fast Wide SCSI 2E. Neither of those sound right. Yeah. NT Server Setup Disk number 3. I think this thing's going to fight us. All right, another hour later, it's getting pretty serious. Stock up on these guys. Winter's almost over. I had once again been chatting with Mark over at the serial port, trying to figure out why I was having such a big problem with this Windows NT install. And he said he was under the impression that the SmartStart CD should solve all these problems. And so I was kind of poking around again. I've got it loaded up again here, like you saw before. And I finally chose Create Support Software. Click OK. And Compaq has this diskette builder with all sorts of stuff. Token ring. Might need that later. So I'm scrolling down here, and I see Compaq Support Pack for NT40. And the description is diskettes containing drivers that can be used to complete the OS installation, which is sounding a lot like what we need. The installation cannot talk to our hard disks. So let's give this a shot. I think we'll put it on a floppy disk. So we'll put another blank disk in. Hopefully this works. And if you're wondering where I'm getting all these floppies from, some guy on eBay, maybe he still is, was selling just like sleeves of these things back in the day, and I picked one up. Used to be, I don't know, 3 inches bigger. Been putting it to work. Okay, the floppy disk is in. I hope for your sake I can turn this into like a cohesive narrative. I'm like 8 hours into this troubleshooting process. Okay, it's gonna go off and do its thing. Oh my god, it wants 4 disks to create this. Okay, so disk 1 is in. I'm gonna have to label these. First disk is making progress. Seems like it's healthy. I didn't test all these disks, obviously, but good thing I've got more. All right, time for disk 2. Started labeling them. I should make it clear I don't actually know what to do with these once I have them, but we'll figure that out. Let's get disk 2 cranking away here. I will obviously do all 4, and then we'll be back with hopefully some OK updates. For good measure, we're gonna hop into the hardware configuration utility. It's kind of like the BIOS of this machine. Let's take a look at what we've got. Important system information. I think this was pretty typical with EISA machines, and basically we could do a whole video on that. I of course don't know what any of this means, so we will save and restart. I booted from the NT4 disk. I'm sure this is making perfect sense, and it can't find my hard drive. I think that's the whole problem. It doesn't understand this Compaq Smart Array thing. So we're going to press S, and then if you scroll up like I was showing you before, there's a bunch that it does understand. I'm going to say Other, and start by putting disk 1 that we just created in there, and just kind of hope, you know, hope and pray. There we go. That worked. Holy crap. Well, it hasn't worked yet. So what was that thing? It was definitely a smart array. I don't know if it is a 5X. It's an integrated smart array. Holy crap. Okay, let's do this. There it is. Look at it. Compaq integrated smart array. It knows about it now. I guess just enter to continue. Oh, and then it didn't find any. Are you kidding me? Yeah, my hard disks are powered on. I hate that you can't start over. It just makes you quit. It always comes back to the SmartStart CD. I threw out a Hail Mary before I went to bed last night in the Report Discord, describing all the troubles I just showed you, and the resounding response was, you need to start the Windows NT install from the SmartStart CD. Of course, we had just looked around in there, and I didn't see anything obvious other than the diskette builder to do something like that, and CDI came in with some critical information. A document outlining the exact procedure, and it has an important piece of trivia in there. If you have previously set up a Compaq machine with the SmartStart CD and an OS, you won't have the option to start again. You have to run the erase utility. When I had previously set up this thing with Windows 2000, I hadn't started the install from the SmartStart CD, so I had no idea that that was an option at all, but I'm almost certain I had set it up as a Windows 2000 machine. Let's go run that system reset utility in the SmartStart. We'll fire this loud thing up again, and maybe we'll get somewhere. It's starting to get to the point where I'm worried I'm going to wear this thing out. It's getting pretty up there in age. I think what we want to do is run the system erase utility. It's going to wipe everything, including our array, and it's going to reset the machine and allow us to set up an OS. That was quick. It says cycle system power now. Only done this 80 times. What's one more? All right, so that wiped my array, of course, and it's saying, you know, run the utility. You can see that blinking cursor there. It's trying to load from the CD. A few times throughout this whole operation, this thing can kind of get into a bad state where it's constantly seeking the disk. I can hear it. You can see the light indicator going over and over again. And it won't be able to read disks when it gets into this kind of error condition. I don't know if it's firmware or a hardware issue or whatever. And basically the only solution is you try to tell it to give up, get the disk out of there, and then reboot the whole thing. And we are seeing a different option here. It knows the system is unconfigured, says it detected that, and I can select Windows. I can say, I'm really not holding my breath, Windows NT 4.0. That is a supported operating system on this thing. It's rebooting. After it reboots, it does not give me that menu again. So this thing is like persisting settings to NVRAM or something. You'll have to forgive me for being so confused. It's obviously a very bespoke setup to Compaq and eventually HP. There it goes. It's trying to find everything that's installed. Loading SmartStart. Okay. Now this is the most beautiful thing I've seen in the last 3 days. I don't know about you. Should we do it off Deutsch just to make it way harder? So let's do English. We're setting time and date. I don't believe I have a good battery in this thing. We're gonna leave it at 2001. I don't really care. Definitely agree to this license. Oh my. Let's do assisted integration, because clearly I need assistance. It wants a server profile diskette, which I'm hoping means it wants a blank disk, because that's what I'm going to give it. Go with a red one this time. All right. Uh-oh. I need to figure out how to make a server profile diskette. That's too bad. I'll be back. New plan. We're going to try the manual approach. Let's do manual configuration. I'm really hoping that doesn't need some special diskette. 4.0 English, I believe. This is an experience at any rate. I gotta love it. Okay, yeah, no surprise. It found the integrated smart array controller. I was sort of expecting this to just be able to find everything, because it always does, so let's continue. It's just saying it's going to reboot. I'm going to leave the SmartStart disk in there, and it nearly immediately loads the array configuration utility, which makes sense. That's our first step. Get our hard drives all squared away. Back in the unconfigured controller wizard, you have seen all this. I only have one drive in there, so I have to do a RAID 0. I have bad news and other bad news. I should have made a 2 gig partition. Haven't learned my lesson, and now I can't boot. The CD-ROM's all messed up again. So I'm going to do all that over again, and hopefully this thing comes back to life. I was blaming that CD-ROM, but it might be my burnt copy here. It's been on the bench and getting scraped up and stuff. So that version I was showing you, new in box earlier, pop that in, and it picked up right where the newer version left off. This is 4.9. I think I was running 5.5. And it's copying a bunch of the driver files, I guess, to the disk. The problem is I did not make a 2 gigabyte partition, so I'm pretty sure Windows NT 4.0 is not going to like this, but you know, we've stumbled along this far. Might as well give it a shot. Old one has like way sweeter splash screens, by the way. Way more Windows NT 4.0-esque. It's from 2000, so maybe we should use this old version in the first place. The quick and easy way to set up your server. Yeah, right. Oh yeah, more support software. I don't think I want to do that. I'm not doing it. So this is what we want. It says the system's ready for an operating system. Remove the SmartStart CD. I'll do that right now. Continue. It's rebooted. The instructions say at this point to put your install media in. So I've got the 4.0 disk in there, and I really don't think it's going to work because I messed up the partition, but we'll see. There's NT. It's going to be fascinating if it can find the drive, and maybe we'll get a different error. At this point, that would feel like a win. Not really holding my breath here. Enter to setup. Yeah, it does not see the drive. I'm going to do all that over again, do the 2 gig partition like I should have. Actually, out of curiosity, let's hit S. And do we have drivers sitting here? This is just on the CD, I think. No, I'm going to do it again. The old disk has a super sweet splash screen. Okay, when we're in this little express configuration, and I went with RAID 0, what I should have done is click custom, put my 9 gig drive over there, right? Look at that thing. 9 gigs is enough for anyone. And then I'm going to do create, oh my god, it changes colors. Create logical drive. Here we go. 2048 is what we want there. Yeah. Done, I think. So we've got some unused space. Let me go read the docs on that one. It just says go ahead and accept the defaults on this guy. Okay. So I think Windows NT should hopefully be able to install to logical drive 1. Let's get that done. It's doing its thing, making this system partition thing. I'm assuming a bunch of config and drivers that either this machine wants or Windows NT 4.0 is going to want. Oh, it actually tells me right there. A bunch of Compaq diagnostic maintenance utilities. We're back to this point. If you made it this far into this horrendous video, you must love computers even more than I do. I'm pressing enter, and it does not see my hard drive. No! I'm doing something wrong. It should see the hard drive. We are going to go for broke. Remember that disk, number 1, we made? We're just going to try that again with the right size partition, because I've been messing up these partitions constantly. We're going to press S, other. The disk is in. It's reading it. Okay. We are using a integrated smart array. So it's possible that my integrated smart array isn't one of these things it supports, but I don't know. The computer itself with SmartStart like looked at it and made this disk. Depending on my energy level, I actually have one of these Smart Array 5X controllers, a 5300. But we're going to try the integrated because that's what we're running right now. It's also possible it wants this drive array for Windows NT 4. It wouldn't be too painful to try that again. So let's see. As before, it sees it, but I do have the right sized partition on there, 2 gigs. Let's press enter. No hard disks. I tried to make a smaller partition, 800 megabytes. No difference, tried a bunch of different driver options, nothing. This is our only chance, our last hope here. If I can't get this thing to work, I'm calling it, shipping the video. This is a Compaq Smart Array 5300 controller, and as you can see, it is a computer in and of itself. It's got 128 megs of RAM, bunch of different daughter board type things going on it. This came with this Compaq. It was the original Smart Array controller that was being used with this thing. Didn't come with discs, but this one was all set up and good to go. We're going to throw this thing in there. I have no hope that Windows NT will like this one more than the integrated one, but you know, you never know. Let's put it in. Here it is sitting in this machine. It's got this nice little slot for it so it's not bending. And as much as I love and also kind of hate this machine, it has absorbed about 30 hours of my life this week so far. It's toolless, so I got to give it that. I'm going to power this thing back up, run through SmartStart. And if you're curious, I know this drive's good. I've installed OSs on this drive before, so I don't think it's the drive, and it would be complaining the whole way if you know, it couldn't format it or partition it or whatever. I'm going to do everything you've already seen me do before. I think I've said that like 8 times in this video. And we'll see where we get. I actually don't know why I thought that would work. It can't find any physical drives attached to that smart array. For some reason, I thought you could share the front drive tray backplane with an internal controller. That is clearly not true. Let me check. All right, check this out. This is the cable going to the front drive bay. I don't know if you're allowed to do this, you know, but I'm going to plug it in right here. Assuming the cable can reach, I might have to cut some zip ties here. I don't see any reason that wouldn't work. Let's find out. This is clearly not what you're supposed to do. But at this point, you know, let's just find out. And I'm pretty sure when I slap this baby on, I'm not going to be able to close the lid. I'm going to move it down a slot. Moved it down 2 slots, actually, and plugged my front drive bay in. This thing was actually complaining in SmartStart that both battery packs are dead. So this thing probably won't even work anyway until I rip these out and replace the batteries. I'm not sure. But basically at this point we're at a you know, top 10 Compaq SmartStart fails video anyway, so let's just see what happens. It's talking to the drives. Wow. That's better than I thought that was going to go. For all the trouble I'm having with it, it's pretty impressive. Like, it knows that it was mid-configuration of an operating system, and I mucked with it and swapped the controllers on it. And so it's saying, you know, you can try to fix that or just wipe the system and start over. It's pretty impressive. When this thing initializes, it very briefly says Compaq Smart Array and then switches to HP Smart Array. This must have like a new firmware version or something. That worked. I'll take it. Got the 5300 controller in slot 2. When I lowered it to, it sees the drive, which is pretty sweet. We'll go for broke, get that 2048 partition in there. Just for fun, I'm going to leave the rest unpartitioned. I'm going to give Windows NT one thing to look at. I really don't think that matters, but that's what I'm going to do. This thing's pretty slick. The space will be wasted, I'm sure. Yeah, so in my embedded slot, of course, no drives are plugged into it, and we can see the controller with my wasted space and my partition that Windows NT almost certainly will not like. Oh, and there it is, complaining about the batteries have failed and need to be replaced. I guess the thing is still going to work. It says the array accelerator posted write cache is temporarily disabled. Let's see what we get. I've removed the CD. I think this is going to restart the computer when I click continue. Yep, Windows NT going in for the last time, I promise. This is our last attempt. Place your bets. I'm going to press enter. It's the last time you're going to see me do this. Yeah, no surprise. However, let's load our 5300 controller drivers. The Smart Array 5X controller. And we're going to press enter again, and I think it's going to tell us it can't find a disk. Yeah. Well, we tried. You can't win them all. I suspect I will be able to get NT 4.0 on here eventually with more troubleshooting. The critical aspect of this whole thing is that it's excruciatingly time consuming to actually iterate and try experiments. For example, if I want to try 2 different partition sizes, which you saw me do several times, that's at least an hour of effort waiting for the thing to reset, getting NT all loaded on the disk. Very time consuming. There's plenty of avenues left to experiment with. I could try different NT install media. I could try NT 4.0 Server Enterprise Edition. Another thing would be to get the thing all smart started and everything, and right when I'm about to install NT, pop in a boot disk and take a look at fdisk and see exactly what SmartStart was doing with the disk. I never actually did that to see how it had formatted it or anything. But this was a supported operating system and I was following the instructions to the letter, so I don't really see why Compaq would leave out that step, but you never know. I really don't like ending videos where I don't finish, but I've sunk about 30 hours into this and I'm running out of time this week to, I just don't have that much time to film all this stuff. So I will eventually get this thing running, and hopefully you'll see an update with NT4 and we'll do all the domain controller and token ring stuff that I'd been planning on doing in this video. And throughout the video, I'm kind of, complaining and groaning and bitching, about how it's going. But truth be told, it's really fun to work on these machines. It can be a little frustrating when 30 hours into your hour-long project, you still haven't succeeded. A lot of it is just, I'm probably missing something. And each flavor of enterprise, Compaq or HP, before they bought Compaq, they actually inherited a lot of this Compaq SmartStart stuff, basically, is my understanding. Dell, they all have a different flavor and way you do things, and it's actually really fun to figure it out and compare them and just see if you can get these things working. It's like going back in time and being a system administrator from 25 years ago. But I'll leave it at that. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. Not all of my videos are fail videos. Usually I succeed eventually. And if you'd really like to support the channel, I'm of course on Patreon. I post behind the scenes type videos, the occasional early release, and that sort of thing. Thanks once again, and I'll see you in the next video.